everybody. Today for our weekly more live podcast, we're going to talk about the recognition of Palestine by France and Britain, or we should say more appropriately by the bosses of France and Britain. We will talk about and what that means for an interpretation of what the Western system really is. We will talk about the Sumud flotilla, which is Greta Thunberg's second attempt to make a lot of noise about Gaza. Not just Greta Thunberg, but of course all the terrorists who are organizing this around Greta Thunberg. And we will talk about Spanish President Pedro Sanchez, who has been gotten involved with this by sending a military vessel to accompany the flotilla that is on its way to Gaza with Greta Thunberg on board. Okay, Joel, how are you? Let's get started with this.
Hello, Francisco. Hi, everyone.
All right, so we have a major diplomatic development, because the bosses of Britain and France, Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, are pretending to recognize Palestine. Now, I'm saying pretending to recognize because Palestine, of course, has never existed. It still doesn't exist. There's no such thing as the Arab Palestinian people. No boundaries have been negotiated in any case for any future Palestine. And according to international law, as I explained in one of my articles, the host state would have to recognize the alleged state of Palestine first for the recognition of other countries to matter. And the host state, which in this case is Israel, has not recognized the state of Palestine. So this is a moot point from the point of view of international law. So they're pretending to recognize a non-existent state of Palestine. Why are they doing this? And what does this tell us about the structure of the Western system? I'm going to share my screen because I want to make people aware of the article we just published about this. It is called, can you see it on screen now?
Yes.
So it's called The Recognition of Palestine, the Murder of Jews, and the Collapse of the West. And as you can see, I have both Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron on the left, Keir Starmer on the right, represented as ventriloquist dummies. They're dummies, but they're also ventriloquist dummies, meaning that somebody else is really controlling them. That's the message. And as you can see by the insignia in the armbands of the people controlling them, you can get an idea of who I think is controlling them. Now, what is the point here? I'm trying to take advantage of the fact that the bosses of Britain and France are recognizing or pretending to recognize the state of Palestine to get some purchase on what the Western system actually is, okay? Because this behavior is so absurd and is so extreme, and it is such a profound contradiction with the standard history of World War II that we were given, that once you get into the meat of this, you can actually begin to challenge the interpretation of World War II that we learned in school and start actually getting the picture of what actually really happened and what kind of world we do actually live in.
Okay? Yeah, Francisco, if you let me, when I see that image, if you want to...
let me put it up here, right? Yeah, there you go.
Like, for me, it doesn't make any sense. Like, because the governments of Britain and the government of France, why should it be like manipulated by the Nazis? Like, what does it mean? Because the Nazis were for like 80, 90 years ago, they were
Yeah, it's a
defeated
long time ago.
by the same, but also by the allies who are these ones. So
Right.
what is going on here?
Well, not only that, they told us in school that the German Nazis lost the war, right? That's what they told us.
Yes.
They told us that Britain and the United States and plus the French resistance won the war, and that the German Nazis lost. So this seems like a crazy way to represent things. Why would Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron be in any way controlled by the German Nazis if the German Nazis lost the war, right? This seems to be a ridiculous representation of the world system. But that's precisely what I'm claiming. So as I say in the introduction here, I say, I claim that the textbook interpretation of World War II, the one we learned in school, is a complete lie. I claim that the German Nazis did not lose the war. Okay, so you can call that my hypothesis. And the clue that gets us to, that forces us to consider this, in my view, is precisely that the British and French bosses, Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, have now pretended to recognize the state of Palestine, and this is very important, without imposing any conditions. Okay? They didn't require of the Arab Palestinians anything. For example, you must commit not to try to exterminate the Israeli Jews. That might be a condition, a reasonable condition that you might impose on recognition. But no, not even that. So how does this help us understand the system? And why am I saying that the German Nazis didn't lose the war? Okay, so the first thing you have to understand is that recognizing Palestine is absolutely the highest priority for these two leaders. And that's already very strange. So that's where I'm gonna start there, because a recent poll in France returned the result that 75% of the French actually oppose that Macron recognize Palestine right now. 75% are opposed. And among non-Muslims, that opposition rises to 80%, more or less. Okay. And France is a mess. It's a mess because of Macron. Macron has turned France into a complete and utter mess. And his approval rating is very low. The French disapprove of Macron at 76%. So he should be doing things to make himself more popular, you would think. But even though an overwhelming majority of non-Muslim French oppose the recognition of Palestine, so-called Palestine, he still went out on a limb to do it. Now, Keir Starmer is doing the exact same thing. So in Britain, we have that something like disapproval is at 71%. Okay, 71% of Britons disapprove of Keir Starmer. Britain is also a tremendous mess, and about 94% of British non-Muslims oppose recognition of Palestine without conditions, which is what Starmer did. So again, Starmer is not responding to internal pressure here. He's doing this because he cares about it, not because the British public is somehow cornering him into recognizing Palestine. So this, in both cases, in both the case of Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer, we can say that this is deeply important to them. It's a top priority. They will do it even if their entire countries are against it. Okay? So why are they doing it? Well, according to what they say in public, Macron says that he's doing this because there's humanitarian suffering in Gaza and because he wants peace. And Starmer also said that he wants to, quote, revive the hope of peace. Should we believe that? Well, I don't think so, because these people don't give any evidence of actually caring about human suffering. I'll give you a few examples that make this very clear. Across the entire Middle East, we have all of these Gulf countries that are run by jihadi power elites. I'm thinking of Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, Bahrain. And a rough estimate puts the total number of slaves in these countries, the combined, at 16 million. Think about that number.
Wow.
Think about that number. 16 million slaves. 16 million slaves. And these are literal slaves. It's not a metaphor. They cannot leave. They have a master. They are routinely raped and beaten. They're not paid. They live in awful conditions. When they are no longer considered useful, they throw them out into the streets. And some of them die of hunger, can't struggle to feed themselves. 16 million slaves. That's a humanitarian disaster. We never hear Emmanuel Macron or Keir Starmer talk about any of that. And let me just share my screen for a second, because we have an article about this humanitarian disaster on Management of Reality. And it is this article here. Okay, Paradox, the anti-Qatar protests on U.S. campus. That's a sarcastic title, because of course there are no protests on U.S. campus against the suffering of slaves in Qatar. I focused on Qatar because Qatar is the worst offender. It's the country with the most slaves. You're not going to believe this, Yoel, but there are 8 slaves per Qatari citizen in Qatar. 8 slaves per Qatari citizen.
Wow.
Ancient Sparta was considered the most extreme slave state in all of history. And in ancient Sparta, they had, according to our best evidence, 7 slaves per citizen. So Qatar is worse than ancient Sparta. All right?
Wow. That's insane.
That's insane. That's just insane. So let me keep going, because I have several examples here. We also have that there are the Christian communities in North Africa and the Middle East are being destroyed by jihadis. And this has been happening over the last several decades. But these humanitarian saviors, Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer, never have anything to say about that. Okay, these are fellow Christians, and they never have anything to say about that. They're always crying about Gaza, but about these Christians who are being exterminated, they have nothing to say. Some sources claim that being very specific about the areas under Hamas and Palestinian Authority control, okay, because those are the areas that these guys supposedly care a lot about, right? They care a lot about Gaza. They care a lot about Judea and Samaria. They're always talking about it, right? Well, in those areas governed by Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, it is estimated that Christians have been nearly wiped out. So there's a 90% decline in those populations. That's ethnic cleansing. Okay, you can call that a genocide. When a population is reduced from 100 for every 100 people, now you have only 10 people left. That's grounds for investigating accusations of genocide, of course, but they never talk about that. They never talk about the Christians. Okay, Macron never makes a sound about these Christians that Hamas and the Palestinian Authority have persecuted. But when one Israeli missile, by mistake, hit one Catholic church in Gaza, he immediately made a big stink about that. Okay, that's where you can see where the hypocrisy.
Yeah. Yes.
And Keir Starmer is the same thing. He never talks about the one time in with his Easter message. You know, he gave a message in Easter, and he said that he was paying tribute. I quote, he said that he paid tribute to Christians facing hardship, persecution, or conflict around the world who cannot celebrate Easter freely. End of quote. That's it. That's all he did. He sent good wishes to all of the Christians persecuted around the world who cannot celebrate Easter freely. That's what. Well, thank you. Thanks. But nothing about Nigeria, for example. Nigeria has been called, quote, a killing field of defenseless Christians, end of quote, because over 52,000 Christians have been murdered by jihadis. 52,000 Christians. And in Nigeria, Muslims are suffering too. The non-jihadi Muslims are suffering too. 34,000 moderate Muslims have likewise been killed by jihadis in Nigeria. But you never hear Starmer and Macron cry about that. And then we have the Arabs killing other Arabs, right? There's many Arabs who are getting killed by other Arabs. And Starmer and Macron never complain about that. There's a very famous video. I don't know. Can I show a video, Yoel?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so if I share my screen, will people be able to hear it?
Yes.
Okay, so let me.
I will let you know otherwise, but yes.
Okay, so this is a famous YouTube video of the Yemeni. What's his name? His name is, let me see. His name is, I have it right here, Luai Ahmed. Okay, Luai Ahmed. He's talking about Arabs killing other Arabs, and he's complaining that the UN doesn't care about that. They only care when they can twist the facts to accuse Israel of killing Arabs. But when Arabs kill other Arabs, nobody says a word. Check out what he says. I'm going to make it full screen.
I asked the UN, the Arab League, and everyone who has been raising the Palestinian flag since October 7, where is the flag of Yemen? In my country, 500,000 people have died in the last 10 years. The biggest famine and humanitarian crisis in modern history. Why does no one care when 500,000 Yemenis die? What about Sudan? In less than 2 years, more than 150,000 people have been killed. Where is the flag of Sudan? What about Syria? 500,000 Syrians have been killed. Where is the Syrian flag? High Commissioner, why is it that when Arabs kill millions of Arabs, no one bats an eye? Where is the outrage and where are the protests? High Commissioner, may I ask why your report mentions Israel 188 times, yet fails to mention the Islamic regime in Iran even once? How can you speak about the conflict while ignoring the party that has armed, trained, and funded terror proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, who have been bombing Israel thousands of times? Why don't you mention the Houthis in Yemen, who have spent millions of dollars firing missiles at Israel instead of feeding my starving people? And why is Qatar sitting here as a member of the Human Rights Council when they host the Hamas terror leaders in luxury hotels?
Tremendous.
Yes.
I couldn't have said it better. That's why I showed the video. And then we have, just to continue with the exposing the hypocrisy. You know, when Saddam Hussein was running Iraq, the United States led the West to impose sanctions on Iraq. Okay. Those sanctions were estimated to have killed 500 million Iraqi children. Children.
Wow.
Did I say 500 million? Forgive me. 500,000.
Ah.
Sorry, I meant to say 500,000. So half a million Iraqi children. Okay. And nobody called that a genocide. So even if you accept Hamas's claims for how many Gazans Israel has killed, right? The most that Hamas has claimed is something like 66,000, and that's not even all children, right? So of those 66,000, they claim that 20,000 are children. Of course, you can't believe those numbers. They're obviously inflated. These are numbers that are coming from a terrorist organization that has an interest in exaggerating everything because they know that the media is then going to turn Israel into the bad guy and so forth. But even if we accepted those numbers, which are obviously inflated, they're much smaller than 500,000 children killed, 500,000 children killed, right? Nobody called that a genocide. In fact, nobody complained. Nobody complained. Well, Leslie Stahl complained. So Leslie Stahl is a journalist in the United States, and she sat Madeleine Albright down for an interview. At the time, Madeleine Albright was the U.S. Secretary of State. Okay, and Leslie Stahl asked her, "Well, but we're killing 500,000 Iraqi children. Is this worth it?" And just I'm going to share my screen again so that you can see what Madeleine Albright answered, because it's too amazing. You have to see this to believe it. I'm going to give you the full screen.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it? I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Wow.
Amazing also is the matter-of-fact style in which she answered the question.
En la versión oscura, Mulan no sobrevive, pero no muere en la guerra. La tragedia empieza cuando vuelve acá.
You know, she answers in a very matter-of-fact style, you know, as like it's nothing. Well, you know, it's a difficult choice, but we think it's worth it. We think it's worth it. We think it's worth it to murder 500,000 children.
She didn't even think about the answer. Like she just yes, like it's a yes. Let's see what we say, but it's a yes. Like whatever we do, the US, it's okay. Like,
so these people are monsters. And these are the people accusing Israel of committing genocide, when, of course, everything Israel does. Look, Israel, in its operation in Gaza City right now, they build an entire infrastructure in the south of the Gaza Strip to receive the entire civilian population of the city of Gaza and give them humanitarian aid, medical assistance, food, and so forth before the military operation against Gaza City began. Okay, this is the country that these monsters are accusing of committing genocide. So you can see the hypocrisy, because you know what, Keir Starmer, forgive me, the government of France and the government of Britain, when the U.S. was imposing these sanctions on Iraq, they didn't complain about these children dying. They didn't complain that 500,000 children in Iraq were being killed. To the contrary, they officially supported the sanctions and participated in the sanctions. In other words, they collaborated in the killing of all those Iraqi children. And now they're crying all these crocodile tears for the people of Gaza. They like they're supposedly humanitarians. These people are not humanitarians. Okay, so and then what about the U.S.? Okay, so the U.S. is currently being governed by at least officially by President Donald Trump. Okay, well, Donald Trump, this is a quote, from his meeting with the Emir of Qatar, whom he calls the Amir of Qatar.
Do you have it to show it?
Yeah, sure, I can show it. Here it is. It's good for people to see. You're right. Here's the quote. Can you see it, or is it properly centered? No.
I will. Okay, I will do it like this. Okay, perfect.
That's good. All right. He says, it's a great honor to be with the Emir of Qatar, a highly respected man, a real leader in a large part of the world, in a very important part of the world. And we've known each other a long time. We've been friends for a long time. How about that? He's talking about the Emir of Qatar, the most important slave trafficker in the entire world. The worst slave trafficking criminal in the entire world. That's Trump's best friend. And it's a great honor for Trump to meet him. Because this guy is, according to Trump, a highly respected man and a real leader. Okay? But of course, Trump goes beyond words. The U.S. keeps its most important military base in Mordor, in Qatar, in this nightmare state that is oppressing 2 million slaves. Just in Qatar, there are 2 million slaves. So the U.S. keeps its most important military base in the Middle East, not in Israel, the supposed ally, but in Qatar, the worst of the jihadi slave states. Okay, they have the Al Udeid base there in Qatar, and that is the headquarters of Central Command. Central Command has responsibility for the entire North Africa, Middle East, and Central Asian region. Okay, there's almost nothing more important than Central Command. And where is it? It's in Qatar. It's in the jihadi epicenter of Qatar. Not only that, Trump has announced that he's going to be selling gigantic quantities of military equipment to these Qatari slavers. And his chief negotiator, Steve Witkoff, chief negotiator in the Middle East, is making all kinds of money with the Qataris. Okay, so now, of course, Trump has to keep appearances. He has to do the bare minimum to keep appearances, and to do that, he has pretended displeasure at the British and French recognition of Palestine. But nobody should be fooled by that, because that's just words. Okay, what matters is what is material. And at the same time, Trump is not, now that the Israeli Defense Forces are completing the destruction of Hamas, right? It looks like they're going to complete the destruction of Hamas. So Trump is rushing to make sure that all of the blood sacrifice of the Israeli soldiers who have been dying to liberate Gaza will be in vain. This is what Trump is doing. He's insisting that after Gaza is finally liberated, that Israel will not govern it, that Israel will not control it. He wants Tony Blair, maybe, or somebody else to control Gaza. That's what Trump is doing, the supposed ally of Israel. And he announced at the UN that he will not allow Israel to annex Judea and Samaria. I quote, "I will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank." That's what he calls Judea and Samaria. "Nope, I will not allow it. It's not going to happen," end of quote. Let me just point out, this is this is the manner in which the medieval popes used to talk about the Jews that they had quarantined in the ghettos. That's how the medieval popes talked about the Jews, because the Jews were their slaves, and they could decide what to do with those Jews, whether to let them out or lock them up, whether to force them to wear special clothing and a yellow star, whether they could have contact with Christians or not, and so on and so forth. And this is how Trump is treating the state of Israel. He is pretending that he has the authority on whether Israel gets to annex or not Judea and Samaria, the birthplace of the Jewish people.
Yeah, and do you have the quote there so we can see it? Because I find it so interesting, like how he talks.
Let me first go to the source so that you can see it at the source, and then I'll share the screen. Let me find it.
Because you said like end of the quote, right? Like that's not gonna happen. End of the quote. Like no more discussion. Like who are you? Like,
yeah, who does he think? Who does he think he is? Who does he think he is? That he gets to tell.
President Trump has made a strong statement.
Okay, let me get rid of that. Hold on.
Plan to annex
because
Judea
these things
and
get
Samaria.
started.
And
here we go. So I'm going to find you the exact quote. Here it is. There it is. I will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. Nope, I will not allow it. It's not going to happen. Can you see it? Right there.
No, it's so like so much impotence I have with that phrase. Like who are you to
who
decide
do you think you are?
that? Like who gives you that authorization?
Exactly. Like, imagine Trump telling France something like that, right?
Like,
so anyway, let's move on to the next point. So because I want to get to World War II, which is my promise. Yeah.
I was thinking about a question I want to ask you, but also before that, when you were talking about President Macron and the Prime Minister of UK, you don't need to go to all to different places. You can go just to their own country, what is going on over there, and they don't seem to care, but they seem to care about Palestine over there, but not over their own citizens.
Yeah, well, you make a very good point, and I'm very glad that you said that because I was forgetting to emphasize that. That's absolutely true. Let me.
They seem to care about Palestine over there.
That's absolutely true. Let me point, and I'm very glad. Let me get the. For some reason, I can't share my screen anymore. I don't know why. Hold on. Let me do this. No, I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. We have an article on management of reality that we just published. I think it was a week ago, or maybe a little over that, on the flag controversy in Great Britain, when many Britons started putting up British flags all over the place because they got upset that the local authorities were removing British flags but protecting the Palestinian flag, and this was very offensive to many of them. So there was a movement called Raise the Colors to buy a bunch of buy many British flags and put them up everywhere on lampposts and windows, buildings, everything. And that was sort of a prelude to Tommy Robinson's gigantic march, which he organized after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And one of the things that has been offending the British public is that at the same time that the British authorities arrest people and put them in jail for emitting tweets, for posting tweets or Facebook posts or whatever, critical of Islam or critical of jihadis or whatever, you can go to jail in Britain for doing that. There's no freedom of speech. And at the same time, they have these Pakistani so-called grooming gangs, these rape gangs, that's what they are, that have been going around for a long time, raping white British women, girls, and British authorities knew all about this, and they were doing absolutely nothing, officially, because they don't want to be accused of Islamophobia. And this is what you said inside France. I just saw a video today of a woman, an American woman who's visiting Paris, and she was crying because she can't really visit the city. She's too afraid to walk the streets because she gets assaulted by by Muslim men on the streets of Paris. She was crying. She's I love the city. I want to see the city, but I'm too afraid. This is what's going on. The bosses, the people running Britain and France, as you said, are not protecting their own people from jihadi Muslims. Okay, so you're absolutely right. You don't have to go elsewhere. You don't have to consider what they're saying about Christians getting persecuted elsewhere and so on and so forth. The hypocrisy, the treason is obvious inside their own countries. You're absolutely right about that. Anyway, so let's let me just continue to the next point. Why what are they recognizing? Okay, so they're obviously, everything we've said so far helps establish just how intensely they care about this. Okay, how intensely they care about recognizing so-called Palestine, recognizing so-called Palestine, right? Because they don't care about anything else, right? And they're doing this against the wishes of their own citizens, right? So this is their top priority. Why? What are they recognizing? Well, they are recognizing either Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. And Hamas is a terror organization that rampaged out of Gaza on 7 October 2023, right? And tortured to death the lefty Jewish peaceniks that had established their farms right next to Gaza because they wanted to be friends with the Gaza Arabs and give them jobs, which they did. Those are the people they murdered. They tortured to death 1,200 Israelis, most of them Israelis who wanted to be their friends. And then they took 251 hostages with them. And this is an organization that loudly boasts that they want to exterminate the Israeli Jews, and they say out loud that they're coming for all of us, that they're going to conquer the entire West. Okay, so that's Hamas. The Palestinian Authority has what they call a pay-for-slay program. Okay, this is the nickname that's been given to this. It's called pay-for-slay because a huge chunk of the Palestinian Authority budget is there to reward any Arab who kills a Jew. So if you're an Arab in the Palestinian Authority and you go kill a Jew, they reward you with a lifetime salary. If you try to kill a Jew and fail, or if you succeed, and either way, if you end up in jail, they'll pay you a salary. If you die in the attempt, the salary goes to your family. This is a huge portion of the Palestinian Authority budget, and it's growing.
It's the highest salaries. Is like the number one way to make money.
That's right. If you want to make real money in the Palestinian Authority, you better go kill a Jew if you want to make real money. This is the book where all of this is documented with great detail by one of the West's most important historians, Edwin Black. The book is called Financing the Flames. There's a lot of other stuff in the book, but there's a very good documentation of the pay-for-slay program. And I also want to plug Enrique Pressburger's book, because what Enrique Pressburger documents with great detail is that the money for the pay-for-slay program and for much else that these terror groups do is actually coming from the Western bosses. Okay, so Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron and a bunch of other Western bosses, including, of course, the U.S. government, they are the main financiers of these terror organizations. The overwhelming, the lion's share of the money going to the jihadis is not coming from the jihadi states. It's coming from the Western countries. Okay. From the Western governments, the Western NGOs, from the UN, and so forth. So how is all this relevant to World War II? Now we get to the question that I promised to answer. Well, first thing you need to understand is that Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay, that's what Hamas is. It's a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood has the mission to conquer the entire West. Okay, that's what it was created to do. It's a jihadi organization created to destroy the Judeo-Christian West. And the Muslim Brotherhood was founded by Hassan al-Banna in 1928, but it grew mainly thanks to German Nazi funding in the 1930s, because al-Banna was getting way more money than he could raise himself from the German Nazis. And much of that money was transferred via Haj Amin al-Husseini. And Haj Amin al-Husseini is the founding father of the Arab-Palestinian movement. Okay, so let me just share my screen again, because we have a whole article on him. In fact, I have a whole book on him. You'll be able to access the book from the article. But this is Haj Amin al-Husseini right here, founding father of the Arab-Palestinian movement, and also a top Nazi. He had his own Nazi bureaucracy. It was called Bureau des Gros Mufti, because Husseini was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. And Husseini organized the entire SS divisions for Heinrich Himmler's SS, composed of Bosnian Muslims and Kosovo Muslims. And he also was an important propagandist in the Nazi radio, inciting Muslims to kill Jews. But the worst thing he did is not even that. He became Adolf Eichmann's best friend, and together with Adolf Eichmann, he conceived, created, organized, and administered the entire death camp system that murdered the European Jews. Okay, so he's at a level with Adolf Eichmann, a top leader of the German Nazi final solution that destroyed the European Jews. Okay, so how is this relevant to World War II? Or there you have it. That's the beginning of the explanation. When Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron pretend to recognize Palestine, the only thing they can be recognizing is these terror organizations, which come from the German Nazis, because there is no other government of the Arab Palestinians. All they've got is Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. And the Palestinian Authority, I forgot to mention this, is PLO Fatah. So Fatah is the controlling core of the PLO. We now call them Palestinian Authority, but this is what they are. They're PLO Fatah. And Al-Fatah, the controlling core, that was created by this guy, by Haj Amin al-Husseini, by this top Nazi. Okay, so and it was Husseini who mentored Yasser Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas, the bosses of PLO Fatah, after the war in Cairo. So what I'm about to say is no exaggeration. The German Nazi final solution was a joint project of the German Nazis and the Arab Palestinian movement. And there is a direct line from the German Nazi final solution to the entire current leadership of the Arab Palestinians. Okay? So if the German Nazis, so going back to the initial question, right? Because if the German Nazis had really lost the war, why would the bosses of France and Britain be making their top priority raising the prestige of these organizations, which are directly descended from the German Nazi final solution? That doesn't make any sense if the German Nazis lost the war. But if the German Nazis have secretly been controlling Western institutions since the end of the war, then this behavior makes perfect sense. Okay? So the behavior of Macron and Starmer requires that we put on the table the hypothesis that the people really running the world are the German Nazis. Because otherwise, why would the bosses of France and Britain be so concerned to help out the spawn of the German Nazi final solution, achieve a better position from which to kill the Jews? And this is what they've been doing for decades. So the Oslo peace process was organized by these bosses, by the Western bosses. It was organized by the U.S. with the support of France and Britain. And what the Oslo process achieved was to bring into militarily strategic territory of the U.S. of the Jewish state these terror organizations descended from the German Nazi final solution. Okay, so and let us not forget that PLO Fatah is the creator of Iran. We have a whole article explaining that also on Management of Reality, right? So the entire picture suggests that the Western bosses have the exact same goals as the German Nazis. They're trying to finish the job. They're trying to finish the final solution. So, but does it make literal sense to say that the German Nazis are running this? I think it does. I'll tell you why. Let me share my screen again. Well, before I share my screen, let me just mention one additional fact, which is this. The Oslo process, which I was just talking about, that was an invention of the CIA and of the Pentagon, okay? The Oslo process, which is the diplomatic process that brought PLO Fatah into Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, right? Which began the entire mess that we are now in. That idea, the Oslo process, that was invented by a study published by RAND. RAND is a Pentagon think tank, okay? And that study was authored by Graham Fuller. Graham Fuller was a CIA analyst, okay? So the idea of the Oslo process is a joint CIA-Pentagon idea. And I understand that people who watch a lot of Hollywood movies think of the Central Intelligence Agency of the CIA as a kind of a well-meaning collection of spies eager to defend, Western democracy from gangsters and totalitarian enemies and so forth. And they probably also think of the U.S. military as an institution run by patriotic bosses eager to defend U.S. citizens. But that's not what these institutions are. So let me just share my screen again, because this is also documented on Management of Reality. We got this article here. How many Nazis were secretly recruited at the creation of the CIA? And what we summarize here is the investigation of historian Christopher Simpson in his book Blowback, published way back in 1988. What he documented with material obtained thanks to the FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act, is that at least tens of thousands of German Nazis, including many SS officers and lots of Nazi collaborators from Eastern Europe, were recruited to form the CIA. Okay, so this was the Nazi General Reinhard Gehlen, who was the guy running the Adolf Hitler's intelligence infrastructure in Eastern Europe. He, the U.S. military held him at the end of the war, and he told them, "Hey, if you want, I can reconstruct the entire intelligence infrastructure that we have in Eastern Europe for you." And they said, "Sure," and that's what he did, and that's what the CIA became. Okay, so if people want to read about that, that's where it is. And let me just read to you what the Washington Post wrote. It's right there on the screen. Can you put it in the biggest possible?
Yes.
So people can read it. So of course, people don't know about this because the media, the controlled media, never made a big stink about this. what the Washington Post did with this information is it buried the review of Simpson's book in the back pages, and it never turned it into a front page scandal, which it should have been. And the rest of the media did the same thing. But notice what the concession, quote, it is no longer necessary or possible to deny the fact the U.S. government systematically and deliberately recruited active Nazis by the thousands, rescued them, hired them, and relied upon them, end of quote. Okay? U.S. citizens still don't know about this because the media never informed them. Okay? But this was documented way back in 1988. So what is the CIA? The CIA is a cesspool of Nazis. Now, of course, it makes sense that a cesspool of Nazis, of German Nazis, would invent the Oslo process. Of course, because what they want to do is kill Jews. So they're going to get the spawn of the German Nazi final solution into strategic territory of the Jewish state. And that's what the Oslo process, which these people invented, did. Okay? Now, what about and Christopher Simpson, who's a great hero of the West, also has this other investigation, which explains how these Nazis, in other words, the Nazis at the CIA, corrupted the entire media system. Okay, Simpson has another investigation that explains that. So of course they're not informing you of what happened. That makes perfect sense. Why would they, right? All right, so let me go back to and I forgot to say, what about the Pentagon? What about the U.S. military? Well, the U.S. military, as we explain in these two articles that we have on the screen right now, they in the post-war, what they did is they grabbed Shiro Ishii, who was the Japanese counterpart to the German Nazi medical doctor, criminal doctor Josef Mengele. This Shiro Ishii was doing the same things Mengele was doing in the death camps of the Nazis. He was performing medical experiments on prisoners of war held by the Japanese, including U.S. prisoners of war. In those medical experiments, they were torturing people to death. Those medical experiments, Shiro Ishii was using to develop the science of biological warfare. So what the U.S. military did is they grabbed Shiro Ishii and all of his data, and they used that to develop their own secret science of biological warfare, and they began spraying, get this, millions of U.S. citizens in secret with experimental biological weapons. Okay, this is what we explain in this article. That was documented in the U.S. Senate. Okay, it was initially the first inkling of this appeared in the testimony given before the Church Committee, the famous committee established by Senator Frank Church in 1975. And then in 1977, a different committee more focused on these kinds of things continued to pull on that thread. And it was documented, or at least the military confessed to something like, let me see, how many? They confessed to something like I think it was more than 200 events where they sprayed experimental bioweapons on U.S. citizens, and they were spraying. Again, these were millions of U.S. citizens were exposed. Okay, documented in the U.S. Senate. So that's what these institutions are. That's what the CIA is. That's what the Pentagon is. Okay. Now, the next question, of course, is, well, doesn't this mean that if they're absorbing all these Nazis and behaving like Nazis and putting in motion Nazi policies after the World War, doesn't that have to mean that they were already allied with the Nazis even before the war? And the answer is yes. And we have articles on that too. We have articles explaining the entire eugenics movement, which is the parent movement that produced German Nazism, which was a movement run by the Western bosses, not by the Germans. The Germans were the pupils. They were the apprentices. And we also explain in this article on Neville Chamberlain that the entire British aristocracy was almost the entire British aristocracy was pro-Nazi. People always talk about King Edward VIII, who was very famously in love with Adolf Hitler, but he was a symptom of a larger problem. The entire aristocracy was very excited about Adolf Hitler. Okay, and what about the French? Well, it's very famous that the French offered very little resistance to the Nazis. I mean, it was a token resistance, and then they basically folded. And immediately, the French ruling elite started collaborating with the German Nazis. It's called the Vichy government. After the war, the Vichy government was not really prosecuted. After 1953, there was this general amnesty, and all of the people who had collaborated with the Nazis, they just got away scot-free. So that's France, right? So the system is not it. The system gives every evidence that the German Nazis didn't really lose the war. Germany lost the war, but not the German Nazis. The German Nazis were reabsorbed by these Western countries that had been propping them up. This is what the investigation of the eugenics movement reveals: is that the powerful Western bosses had been creating the German Nazis. Okay, so of course after the war they reabsorbed them and they began, moving the pieces on the chessboard, right? Getting the system ready for the next great mass killing of Jews. And that's what's going on right now. Right now, we're in the middle of the next great mass killing of Jews, which unfortunately confirms my prediction of 2013, because I predicted in 2013 that this would happen when I published my books. And now we're in the middle of that. So now let's finish this with Greta Thunberg's stupid smooth flotilla.
Before you go to that point, which is very important, what I see, I come back to the point you made that 75%, if I listen correctly, were against of Macron officially recognizing Palestine. That's right?
I don't know if it was, I think it was, maybe 75% is what I said, I think, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. So why could a president, like only one person, go and recognize an entire state if the entire population tells you no to do that? That's not democracy, right?
Right. So these are not real democracies. These are counterfeit democracies. So they don't really care what the French want. They have a program. And their program is the destruction of the West. Yeah. This is why they are allied with the jihadis. This is why they don't protect ordinary French.
So what I see here is so obvious, right? Like the citizens of France, they need to see that. Like it's very clear. 75% of us voted for this president, but he has another voice from the people.
But as you said, the evidence they have from within France is even more eloquent. I mean, if you're in France, you can see that the government is not defending you from the jihadis. They're protecting the jihadis. If you are inside Britain, you can see that the government is protecting the jihadis, not the British. If you say anything online against Islam, they'll come and take you and put you in jail. But if Muslims are raping white girls, they won't do anything about that. So you don't need. The people inside these countries don't actually need this. They don't need to think about Palestine to figure out what's going on. They just need to look at what's happening inside their own countries. You made this point.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, it's a general. The problem is generally Western. It's not just France and Britain, obviously. Some of the bosses in these countries are pretending a little bit that they don't want to, they don't want to recognize Palestine yet, blah blah blah. But they're certainly not explaining any of the stuff that we're explaining here. So it's all just theater. It's theater. But there you have Spanish President Pedro Sanchez. He's also very, very interested in Gaza. I mean, he's completely obsessed with Gaza, right? And he's also very, very unpopular, tremendously unpopular. And he's turned Spain into a horrendous mess. But all he can think about apparently is Gaza, and he's actually the pioneer. He's the pioneer because he recognized, he pretended to recognize the so-called state of Palestine in 2024. Okay, he's the one who moved the Overton window, and now he has sent a military vessel to accompany Greta Thunberg's stupid Sumud flotilla, which could be interpreted as an act of war, right, against Israel. Now, thank goodness the Sumud flotilla is kind of falling apart all on its own, because Greta Thunberg has now been pushed out of the executive committee or whatever they call it, because the jihadis on board are upset that one of the people who had joined the flotilla posted online that he's gay. And so the jihadis became very upset that there was anyone gay on board, and the whole thing has become a mess. So who knows what's going to happen there? But I think the flotilla is becoming like a propaganda gift to Israel somehow. But there you have it. This is what's going on, and again, I think it's interesting to connect the dots as we did here, because what it reveals is that we are living in a system governed by the people who have a German Nazi ideology and who want to finish the German Nazi final solution in Israel. When you adopt that model, then all of the facts that we have reviewed here make sense. It makes sense that if we go through them chronologically, it makes sense when you discover that the eugenics movement, which is the movement that produced German Nazism, was being run from the United States and Britain. It makes sense that if you want to look at the specific details of the war, right, or the run-up to the war, it makes sense that there was a so-called appeasement policy, which in our view is not appeasement at all. They were just letting Hitler take Europe without a fight, right? That's what appeasement amounted to. And then it makes perfect sense what was documented also in the 1980s by perfectly mainstream historians, which is that Neville Chamberlain was not a coward, and he was not an idiot, and he was not timid, and he was not confused. He was pro-Nazi. This has been documented very well now, and we have a whole article on that. It was documented in the 80s, but of course nobody has learned of this because the media never talks about it. But Neville Chamberlain was pro-Nazi. He had a Nazi ideology. So the entire appeasement policy now makes sense. Chamberlain and his buddies were making things easy for Hitler because they wanted the German Nazi movement to succeed. Then when you look at the details of the war are also consistent. The invasion of Europe through Normandy, that never happened until it was perfectly clear that the Soviets had already defeated the Nazis. Okay, the Soviets were the Western Allies were supposedly allied with the Soviets against the German Nazis, but and the Soviets kept begging the Western Allies to open a Western front And the Allies kept making excuses. No, it's not. We can't do it yet. It's too difficult. We're not ready. Blah blah blah. They gave almost nothing to the Soviets to help them fight the Nazis. And then, when despite all that, the Soviets demonstrated that the Nazis had lost, and they began advancing against the Nazis, that's when they finally opened the Western Front. But it was not to defeat the Nazis. The Nazis had already been defeated. And we're going to be publishing about it very soon. Then when you look at the post-war, you find out that there was no denazification of Germany. In fact, there was one of the guys in charge of denazifying Germany, the head of the decartelization branch. What was his name? I forget his name right now, but he wrote an entire book to complain about the fact that his bosses were not letting him denazify Germany. His U.S. bosses were not letting him denazify Germany, and it was not denazified. And then, get this, we were talking about how the CIA was created, absorbing the entire Nazi intelligence infrastructure in Eastern Europe. Well, the headquarters of that was in Pullack, a suburb of Munich. That's what they call the Gehlen org, right? Because that's where Reinhard Gehlen, the head of this, had his headquarters. And in 1956, at U.S. insistence, the Gehlen org became the BND, the Bundesnachrichtendienst, which is to say the West German equivalent of the CIA. Okay, so the U.S. made sure that that the Nazis went back in power in Germany. Germany, okay? So it can't become more obvious than that. I mean, how can you make things more obvious than that? So what did they do with Israel? Of course, they created the Oslo process to get these terror groups that are directly descended from the German Nazi final solution. Remember, PLO Fatah is a creation of Haj Amin al-Husseini, who was directing the death camps with Adolf Eichmann, okay? So of course they got that organization into a militarily strategic position, because Judea, Samaria, and Gaza are strategic territories of the Jewish state. Not according to me, that's according to a Pentagon study that was authored immediately after the 1967 Six-Day War. Okay, those are strategic territories which, according to the Pentagon, Israel must control if it is to survive. And what is Trump doing now? He's making sure that Israel will not control them. He is making every effort. He is insisting that someone other than Israel control Gaza, and he is insisting that he will not let Israel annex Judea and Samaria. So he is making sure that, or trying as hard as he can, to make sure that the very territories that Israel needs in order to survive, Israel will not control. It is all consistent with the model that says the German Nazis didn't lose the war. Germany lost the war, but the German Nazis and the German Nazi system is in fact what controls our institutions. And what they always tell people is that the institutions are controlled by whom?
By the good guys.
No. What do they always tell people? That when they what is the conspiracy theory that everybody thinks it's okay to think? They tell them, oh, everything is controlled by whom?
The Jews.
Yes. They tell everybody that the Jews supposedly control everything. What we're showing here is that that's an Orwellian inversion, like so many other Orwellian inversions that have been imposed.
Yes.
Okay? The people controlling everything is the CIA, and the CIA is a cesspool of German Nazis and German Nazi collaborators. That's how it was created. And of course, even if those people die or get replaced, they're getting replaced by others who have the exact same ideology, because that's what institutions do.
Wow, that was so interesting. So what should we do? Like, there's so many things going on in the world. What should we do? Like, spread the message?
That's what we have to do. We have to spread the message, because the reason this is called the management of reality, the reason what we do is called the management of reality, is that it dawned on me a while back that in order to get away with what they're trying to do, in order to murder all the Jews, which is the first step to enslaving all Westerners. Remember, that's what they did last time, right? So last time, the German Nazis and their allies, they murdered all of the European Jews, but they didn't stop there. They didn't stop there. They enslaved all Westerners. Okay? Well, they murdered more than 64 million non-Jews, right? The anti-Semites murdered more than 64 million non-Jews, and then they enslaved hundreds of thousands of additional non-Jews in the area they controlled in Europe. So this is what they do. They kill the Jews and then they enslave everybody else. And this is what they're going to do again. They're going to keep killing Jews in Israel until they're finished. And they're going to enslave all Westerners. And they're doing it already. They're already enslaving Westerners. This is the point you made. They're inside European countries and inside. This is also happening inside the U.S. You should see what's going on in Dearborn, Michigan, where they have a Muslim mayor who is beginning to oppress non-Muslims in Michigan. So we are already being turned into slaves of the jihadis in the West, even as the genocide of the Israeli Jews is ongoing. All right. So what I realized a while back is that all of this entire plan, it cannot succeed if we understand it. If we understand it, they can't get away with it. That's why they manage our reality. That's why they have to take control of the entire media system and the entire academic system, because if we understand what they're doing, then they can't do it. So, forgive me. So the first step in fighting against this, and the urgent step, is to spread this information. If you're listening to this and you want to do your part, and you don't have $1 million to give me, then share. Share. Make sure that you make this information reach everyone you know, and talk to people. Have conversations. They're going to be difficult conversations. I can guarantee that, because people don't want to hear this. It's a big shock. It makes them feel very bad. It makes them lose hope. But there is hope. There is hope, because we have the communication tools right now to go around the mainstream media and talk directly with Westerners everywhere. We have never had this opportunity before. We have a technological opportunity right now where ordinary Westerners, people like Joel and Francisco, can communicate with the entire West if Westerners collaborate and share. So take this seriously. Sharing is a revolutionary act. You know, George Orwell said this. It's a very, very famous quote from George Orwell. He said, in a time of universal deceit, which is, of course, what the management of reality is. It's a time of universal deceit, right? He said, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And that's what every Westerner's responsibility is right now. Our responsibility is to tell the truth. Don't be afraid. Tell the truth, share it, make sure that everybody knows what we're saying. Come learn it first yourself. Check the documentation, make sure that we're telling you the truth, and then spread it as far as you can. And if you do have money, send it our way.
Yes.
We'll put it to good use.
You don't need a huge amount of money. You can go to managementofreality.com. You can give us $10, $50, $100, whatever is your budget. It's amazing for us. So you go to managementofreality.com, then you press here in the English button, and you go down here to donations, and you will see many buttons here, and it will be amazing for us and for all of us, because we are doing this in a non-profit organization. So we have
that's right.
Many.
We're gonna put this money to good use. Yeah. We're gonna use it to make sure that this information gets to many more people. All right, I think we have to wrap it up, Joel. What do you think? So let me just remind people to give us a like, subscribe, and ding the bell, and always share.
Yes.
Share.
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much. I'll see you.